Do you know why we celebrate Halloween?
Hello and welcome to the Cavern of Terror.
Halloween 6, Curse of Michael Myers stars Paul Rudd, Mary Ann Hagan, J.C. Brandy, Donald Pleasance, and is directed by Joe Chappelle. After the birth of her son, Jamie Lloyd flees from the Man in Black. She heads back to Haddonfield in hopes of finding Dr. Loomis. Sadly, Michael Myers is close behind. Before we get started here, I just want to clear something up. I admitted, I messed up. The Myers house is in Halloween 2. When I was writing my script, I completely forgot that the house was in the movie. I apologize. Can we move on with my review of Halloween 6? We can? Alright, cool. Also, before we get started here, I just wanted to let you guys know that this is a review of the theatrical cut and the producer's cut. There will be two separate ratings at the end of this video. Now, let's talk about Halloween 6. I think it's best that we talk about the elephant in the room before we get too deep into this review. Oh boy, guys. Let's talk about the recasting of Danielle Harris to J.C. Brandy of Jamie Lloyd. Do I have a problem with it? Well, sort of. I'm a huge fan of Danielle Harris as an actress in general. I love her in practically everything she's been in. Urban Legend, the Hatchet Trilogy, and especially Halloween 4 and Halloween 5. She really was fantastic in those movies, especially Halloween 4. That's one of my favorite child performances ever. But to have her character return to the series in part 6 and not be played by the actress that made the role famous, I think that was a huge mistake by the part of the studio. There are many interviews that you can watch on this situation. Even Lee from Drum Dums, who will be on this video, has talked about it many times in his reviews of Halloween 6. From what I've gathered, the actress was lowballed and ultimately decided not to be in this film. So here's the million-dollar question. How does J.C. Brandy do? I think that she's fine in the role. Jamie Lloyd really isn't a standout character in either cut of this film. Her role plays out more naturally in the theatrical cut. Getting into the producer's cut, one of the biggest differences is the opening act. We get a better explanation as to what happened to Jamie Lloyd and Michael Myers after Halloween 5. The voiceover that they used in this sequence is also completely different. In this cut, rather than Paul Rudd's Tommy Doyle, we actually get Donald Pleasance's Dr. Loomis. This change to me is a more powerful opening. It had me hooked a lot quicker because it was more familiar. As far as the producer's cut goes, Jamie is kind of a double-edged sword. J.C. Brandy's extended time in part 6 actually gives us more screen time for Donald Pleasance. Dr. Loomis has much more play in this cut of the film because of this. His scenes are practically removed from the theatrical cut, and that should be a crime. Moving on to the score in the theater-released version, Alan Hogwart's work here is very 90s. And it's more of an evolution of the score that we got in part 5. Come to think of it, this movie is extremely 90s, at least the theatrical cut is. Take a mix of young upstart actors, snappy editing, and a slick production, that's pretty 90s. I like this version of the score with its rock cues. Don't get me wrong, I like me some metal. Unfortunately though, it feels completely different and not very Halloween. I believe there is a way to do a Halloween score with a rock edge, but it wasn't done here. It was actually done better in Rob Zombie's Halloween. Yeah, I said it. Go listen to that track. The score in the producer's version is more in line with the '78 Halloween. Like I said, the score is more John Carpenter's Halloween, but it's stock John Carpenter's Halloween. That's great for mood and atmosphere, but it really doesn't do anything new for the franchise. Rather than moving us forward, it actually takes us backwards. Paul Rudd's acting as Tommy Doyle is interesting to say the least. His performance is quite strange. His delivery is awkward at a lot of points.
Come on, you don't really believe that Michael Myers is actually alive?
Michael's work isn't done in Haddonfield. And soon, very soon, he'll come home to kill again.
I understand what the filmmakers were going for. I'm the weird guy, but it came out more funny than disturbing. On the flip side though, I did believe that this was a grown-up version of Tommy Doyle, so the performance and the character choices was effective in that aspect. With the producer's cut, there's still not much of a difference with Paul Rudd's Tommy Doyle character. He still sounds like a 1920s gangster. I was only 8 years old when I saw him. I loved Mary Ann Hagan's performance as Kara Strode. I think that she was a very strong lead and a hell of a good replacement for whatever Tina was trying to be. Don't worry Tina, I still like you. The Strodes in Part 6 can be kind of confusing though. There's a very small line explaining how they're related to Laurie. So if you aren't paying attention, you're going to miss it entirely. Growing inside of him, contaminating his soul, was pure evil. Donald Pleasance is incredible in his final film in the franchise. Dr. Loomis did get old here. There is a drastic difference between his character here and the one in Part 5. I know that this movie was released 6 years after Revenge of Michael Myers, but you have to remember that Donald Pleasance was 59 in 1978 when Halloween was released. This doesn't take anything away from his performance. This Loomis was a lot more in line with the OG Halloween Loomis. Calm and respectful, but he was still on a mission. The family breakfast scene is perfection to me. Had we had a scene like this in Rob Zombie's Halloween, I think people would think about that movie a lot differently now. I also love the interplay with the characters. I think that's what people would do in a situation like this. Bradford English as Mr. Strode and Marion Hagen as Kara have a brilliant chemistry in this scene. This scene to me is probably one of the most well-acted scenes in the whole movie. This scene ends a little differently in the producer's cut, and I think it's a little bit too on the nose. The realization to us that Danny is holding a knife to his grandfather is much scarier without the warning coming. Both cuts of Halloween 6 have a quick pace. I never caught myself checking out of the movie, even with the added scenes in the producer's cut. The producer's cut really isn't that much different until the third act. But there are small clips throughout the producer's cut version of Curse of Michael Myers that make this film seem a lot more like the original films this is a sequel to. This cut shows more of Michael Myers stalking his victims, accompanied by that Carpenter-esque score. That pesky Myers house is back and it's different once again. It's funny how no one complains about the house in Part 6, but they just hate the house in Part 5. Is that a double standard? Nah. Now I guess is the best time to talk about the look of Curse of Michael Myers. Just like with the previous installments, they nail the fall vibe. This version of Haddonfield to me feels like the closest version to the original setting. The love for the holiday of Halloween itself is very strong. There are very few scenes that didn't include a pumpkin of some kind. The use of color here is probably its best since Halloween 2. The Mrs. Blankenship scene is atmospheric as hell because of this choice. The basement scene with Mr. Strode is heavily affected by this as well.
She actually left.
It has to be one of the scariest scenes in the original franchise. The whole scene is filled with beautiful cinematography. Guys, it blew me away. Now let's talk about the shape, because oh my god, Michael Myers is amazing in this movie. I usually separate the kills from the performance of the character, but guys, I can't do it this time because Myers is brutal. A spine coming out of a neck comes to mind. Man, that hurts my neck just thinking about it. But with that said, this performance of the character really depends on which cut of the film that you watch. The kills in the producer's cut aren't quite as graphic as they are in the theatrical version, but they still get the job done. If I was forced to pick, I would pick the kills in the theatrical cut because they're much more visceral. That doesn't take anything away from George P. Wilbur though, who returns to the Halloween series for his second stab at the character. I liked his performance in Part 4, but guys, he really nailed it this time. He brought much more intensity to the role this time. The real question is he better than Don Shanks in Part 5? And right now, I can't answer that question. I'd have to watch both versions of the movie a couple more times and Halloween 4 a couple more times to give you a solid pick. Maybe that'll be answered in a ranking video. Okay, now we're going to do something a little bit new here that I've been wanting to roll out for a while. We are going to hand out the douche nozzle of the film award. Ladies and gentlemen, the award goes to Mr. Strode. Could that guy be any more of a dick? I will say though, now that you're throwing money at people, you can throw some at me. Okay, so the third acts of the theatrical cut and the producer's cut are the most different. So I figured it would be fun if I let Lee from Drum Dums, who has been on all of these videos, talk to you guys about the theatrical cut ending. One massive thing I want to say before I hand the reins over to Lee is that he actually made his own cut of this film and brought in the parts from the producers and theatrical that he loved to make his own film called the Blue Myers Cut. I've personally seen it and it's very good. Lee has talked about his cut of the film many times on his channel. I'm sure he'd appreciate it if those videos got a little bit more views. Take it away, Lee.
Thank you, Zach. What's up, guys? This is Lee from Drum Dums. Here again to talk about Halloween, my favorite franchise. Today we're going to be talking about Halloween 6, and the scene that I want to talk about is the last act of the theatrical cut. What's interesting about the final act in the theatrical cut is the way that it all, happened. Really, it was over a weekend, and I believe if you dig behind the scenes, director Joe Chappelle actually went in this warehouse or wherever it was and just shot over a weekend. I don't even think he had permission from the producers. They did it behind the producers' backs. And that's real. So that whole last act, when you got Michael running through the hallway with the red lighting and everything, pushing the guy through the bars, and then the pipe beat down at the end, all of that was filmed in like a weekend. And I remember seeing this scene unfold in the theater. And to me, it was my favorite part of the movie. This is when it all came to a head. Got this massive laboratory massacre. Something that we had never seen Michael Myers do. This was Myers just completely unloading and killing multiple victims in one fell swoop. And really, this is one of the scariest versions of Michael ever. And I think still to this day. I think the one thing that people love about 6 so much is just how scary it is. And when you compare this to a movie like H2O, like that Michael would completely wipe the floor with H2O's Michael. Even if you like H2O, I'm sorry, I'm right on this. But then you got Paul Rudd having a face-off with Myers, and really he has to trick him. He pumps the vial of whatever liquid goo that was into him, and then just beats the crap out of him with a pipe. But that final scene with Loomis, or you hear Loomis's voice, and you see Myers' mask on the ground, really just sent chills down my spine, because that was the last scene with Loomis in the franchise. The last thing of Loomis in the franchise is audible. It's not visual. And it really just gives you goosebumps. And it makes me sad. I remember watching this movie in the theater, and I felt sad after hearing that, because Donald Pleasance was no longer with us. So anyway, thank you, Zach, for having me for Halloween 6, which happens to be one of my favorite sequels of the franchise for so many reasons. If you want to check out my full-length Halloween 6 revisited review, which is over 30 minutes, be sure to check that out. Had a great time really just diving into that movie. And back to you, Zach.
Thanks, Lee. I can't wait to have you back on H2O. Both cuts have their flaws, but in the end, the producer's ending actually does a better job at explaining what the Cult of Thorn was trying to do. However, this ending is more anticlimactic, and it sets up a sequel that we never got. There is more finality in the theatrical cut ending, which in a weird way actually prepares you more for H2O. In the end, guys, after watching both cuts of Halloween 6, Curse of Michael Myers, I'm going to have to give the theatrical cut a meh, maybe borrow it from a friend. The theater-released version of this film is a slick 90s production, and it's definitely a product of its time. But it didn't really feel like a Halloween film to me. They just changed way too much. The awkward performance by Paul Rudd in almost cutting out Dr. Loomis entirely definitely didn't help their cause. As far as the producer's cut goes, I'm going to have to give it a It may have just as many negatives as the theatrical cut, but in my opinion, it is the better film. Restoring the scenes of Donald Pleasance make it more of an understandable plot, and the more Carpenter-esque score helped darken up the atmosphere and make it seem more like a Halloween series sequel. I do like both versions of this film though, and I could see myself watching both cuts on Halloween. Okay guys, I apologize if things look a little different. I have to be honest, I got a little excited, and as soon as I finished both cuts of the review, I turned off the camera and forgot to film the end. I even forgot to pull out my H2O Blu-ray. Alright guys, that's it. We have made it through. That has been my review of Halloween 6, Curse of Michael Myers. What do you guys think of Curse of Michael Myers? Which cut do you prefer, theatrical or producer's cut? Let me know down in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up, and if you want to see my review of Halloween H2O, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. That way you get notified about all my future content. That doesn't only include my Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection reviews, it also includes my review of Final Destination 2. That's right guys, I'm jumping back into the Final Destination franchise. I reviewed the original one about a long time ago. I have a playlist called Final Destination Reviews. You can go over there and check out that video if you haven't seen it. The Final Destination series is going to be really fun, and I just happened to be getting into one of the most well-loved films in the whole franchise. As always guys, I would appreciate it if you check me out on social media. You can find the links to all those accounts in the description box down below. But most importantly guys, I'm Zach, this has been the Cavern of Terror. Stay metal my friends. This time I filmed it all.